So I am Father Nolan, the assistant pastor at Our Lady of Mount Carmel. I assume you're either parishioners or friends of parishioners or so on. Happy, first Vespers of St. Patrick's Day for those of you who are Irish in the back there. Tonight we're going to be speaking about toxic masculinity, which has been propelled into the public sphere by a Gillette commercial, I guess. So you're not familiar with Gillette, right? The best a man can get. So they decided to wade into the fray of like feminism and the social justice and all that. And so they came up with this video, which we will watch shortly. But I guess I would be curious at first. Well, actually, I'll just explain this picture. So, having just finished the Rosary, we're contemplating Christ, the just judge. And that's a pretty manly Christ there, right? And, Christ, a great example of everything a man should be, right? So we have, the usual pictures we see of Christ and the children, and Christ healing people, and, Christ peaceful and good, the good shepherd and all that. We don't often see Christ the fearsome judge, right? He came to the world the first time in love and compassion as a little babe in the manger. He's going to come the second time with legions of angels to judge mankind. And he will put the just on his right side, enter ye blessed into the kingdom of my Father, and on the left, depart from me, ye accursed, into everlasting fire. Right, that's not the kind, sweet, gentle Jesus. That is Jesus pronouncing judgment, just judgment. And that is a manly thing to do, to be strong, to judge even, as St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and 5. We shall judge angels and men, he says. Okay, so Christ the just judge. Launching into our presentation on toxic masculinity. I like that little slide there. Okay. There we go. All right. You biological hazards, all of you. So I didn't really know much about the topic, so I just went on to the Oracle, YouTube, and started poking around. It was pretty interesting, like YouTube, the internet, that kind of stuff. And what did I find? Toxic masculinity. A narrow and repressive view that defines manhood in terms of violence, sex, aggression, and status. I'm like, okay, I would agree with that. The cultural ideal of manliness where strength is everything and emotions are weakness. Okay, I would agree with that too. I don't think that's a good idea of manhood either. I think strength is important to a man, and emotions can be, weakness, but I wouldn't define it that way. Yeah? Sex and violence are yardsticks by which men are measured. Well, that's bad too. And the supposedly feminine traits of emotional vulnerability and a lack of hypersexuality can jeopardize one's status as a man, or remove one's status there. I actually put this slide together like about 2 hours ago, so it's that panic, the last minute stuff. So actually, I found a lot on toxic masculinity, and I agreed with much of what people were saying. That is actually, I agree with you, that is not a good example of masculinity either. Right? If that was the ideal, or if that was the goal, I would be campaigning against it, just like you all would, right? And so, that was kind of the idea behind the Gillette video. So we will take a pause from I couldn't embed the video I didn't know how to do that, so we just have it here. So this is the Gillette commercial, right? On their idea of toxic masculinity. And it was controversial because, I'll just let you watch it. We'll talk about it later. Go to,
bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual harassment.
Masculinity. Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide from it. It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding
Okay, all right. Gillette. There we go. So, was that audio all right? Did we hear pretty much? Okay, what are our thoughts on that one? Little audience participation.
Gillette is still in business?
So there's a huge backlash against this. Guys like videotaping their Gillette cans go into the garbage, their razors, their like shaving cream. I don't know how much of a financial impact it made, but there were people, a lot of people weren't happy about it. So why do we think that? Something I noticed was a little bit of toxic femininity in there. Was those girls in bikinis, and if a man displayed any kind of reaction to that the women didn't want, he was a problem, right? And that's something that we'll get into here, is if there's toxic masculinity, there is toxic femininity as well, right? And that's part of toxic humanity. Is that, yes, human beings have problems, and men and women are different, and based on those differences of nature, you get different ways that toxicity is expressed. The masculine toxicity, the feminine toxicity. So it stems from original sin, the fall of man, which actually I don't talk too much about in this presentation. I just focus on the natural. But this is something that people are noticing, right? The world is noticing men are behaving in ways peculiar to men that are not good, right? And they're pointing it out. It's kind of like the world's return to morality, which we departed from in the 60s and 70s, right? Is we got away from traditional masculinity, which was a patriarchal oppression of women, and in the reaction against that, men were encouraged, don't follow the traditional idea of a man. Right, which was partly responsibility, duty, respect of women, and so on. But also you get the kind of John Wayne masculinity, right? Which is the never show affection to your son. And I remember one movie where his son did something wrong, and John Wayne punches him in the face. And that was supposed to be like the fatherly, way of dealing with children. Okay, that's not very good, right? So there's some. There was some reason for we could say this movement in the 60s and 70s to get away from a rigid masculinity, but they completely abandoned everything. And then what do you think happened? What we've been seeing in the past couple decades is a, hedonistic kind of a lifestyle. Do whatever makes you feel good. Well, when men do that, toxic masculinity is the result. Right, and now we got this huge uproar about toxic masculinity. Oh, where did it come from? Where did it come from? It came from what you said for them to do 20 years ago, right? Which was to indulge their emotions. So I think that's part of it. Is that for a lot of men, the men this age, right, our age, who were doing what the world told them to do for the past 20 years, suddenly now they're the problem. So they're experiencing a bit of hypocrisy. Yeah, we just did, but we thought was the model given to us for when we were growing up, kindergarten, middle school, high school, right? Promiscuity, condoms distributed. What do you think men are going to think about, right? What do you think their nature is? And then now they're getting blasted for doing what they were told to do. So I would say that probably has much to do with it. Let's see, what else? Well, that right there, I think the idea of a man standing behind the grills, with the steaks, that's a stereotype. Right, the stereotypical man, and that's your toxic masculinity. The guy that stands there, who's beefy arms crossed, grilling steaks, and corn on the cob. That's your toxic man. So if you're doing that, you're a toxic. That's an example of toxic masculinity. So it's like, whoa, what is this? We're getting lumped in. There are plenty of men who do that who are not toxic, right? What else? Any other observations?
They weren't really defining toxic masculinity so much as they were making masculinity toxic. And then there's a big difference.
Yeah, and that was something I did notice in many of the articles, etc., that I was reading online, was they were careful to make the distinction. Masculinity itself is not toxic, but when men do certain things, it becomes toxic, right? But that brings up some good points. We'll kind of move on. The video. What is masculinity? Right? People ask this question, and we get some various definitions. Some people call it a set of behaviors and practices traditionally associated with men and manhood, which makes it a custom. Masculinity is a custom that people follow. Okay. Attributes regarded as characteristics of men. Again, that's another opinion. So both of these two equate masculinity with opinion. And that's what I was finding over and over again, was masculinity was pure opinion. That was its basis. Or, and this is a definition I had tried to come up with, the characteristics commonly exhibited by male Homo sapiens as a result of the biological facts of hormones, sexual organs, and psyche, and the societal expectations attendant upon those male attributes. The foundation for masculinity comes from nature. It comes from the reality of men. And when we say a man, we're talking about the male Homo sapien species. That is what we're talking about, right? Masculinity comes from nature. It comes from the way that male human beings are put together. Same way where femininity comes from. It's not an opinion. It's not a set of behaviors associated with man. It's a fact. And that starts to get into why the Gillette commercial, etc., why these people that have good intentions, they see something going wrong. Because bullying, right? That kid getting chased, being called a sissy, etc., that's completely unacceptable, right? That's not good. And that is something they recognize. This needs to stop. Bullying should stop. Allowing children to be, the two kids fighting and beating each other up? Boys will be boys. No, you had to teach them how to behave, right? So the examples they chose were good examples, but then the idea behind it is not based on good principles, we could say. Masculinity is more than a set of opinions. Okay, what's next? Oh, here we go. Levels of importance. So the fundamental reality of masculinity is nature. Simple facts. Genetics, hormones, biology. And you've got two kinds of two kinds of human beings, male and female. The basis is fact. The basis is nature. That's the individual level. Besides male and female, you have men and women. Now we're talking about persons. And a person, they've got feelings, thoughts, abilities, and desires. So as a person, I have a certain biological reality. What do I do with it? How do I interpret it? How do I feel about it? What are my strengths and weaknesses, etc.? And those can vary widely. Men are generally stronger than women. More independent. They tend towards certain characteristics, but certain women are stronger than some men. I remember being in the Marine Corps, like standing behind some woman in the PX, and I was like looking at her shoulders and thinking, man, that's a big woman. And she was in shape. I was like, I would not fight that female right there. Like she would cream me. The funny thing was though, I saw that same woman later on Liberty. And she was out of uniform, and she was in a dress, and she had lipstick on, and she was doing her best to be feminine. I mean, her biceps were like bulging out of her dress. And you know, so she just had that sense, like I don't want to speculate about her internal thoughts, but there, at the level of nature, I could see that she did want to be feminine, even though she was in this very masculine environment. So there's where you get the combination of feelings and thoughts and abilities and so on. You take any Olympic female athlete, she'd smoke all of us at whatever she does, right? And then some, right? But you take an Olympic male athlete and an Olympic female athlete, or even just not an Olympic athlete, a regular male athlete against an Olympic female, and there are a lot more that can beat her. And then you get this ridiculous... this rapper in the UK decided he was a female, so he gender transitioned to female, joined a powerlifting competition, shattered the previous records, and then transitioned back to male. And claimed his records had to stand as the most powerful female wrestler, because at the time he identified as female.
There was an uproar about that same scenario with the MMA.
Mixed martial arts.
There was a guy who decided to fight women because he transitioned, and he was pummeling them. He was absolutely obliterating them. And so there was a big uproar over that in the MMA
Yeah, so there's this regular guy. He wasn't a very good mixed martial arts fighter. I mean, he was okay, which means he was pretty deadly. But I mean, you go into the MMA. If you go to the MMA to win at the mixed martial arts, the UFC, you got to go in that ring willing to die in your attempt to win. Like, it is absolutely brutal in there. There are guys that just unbelievable. So this okay MMA fighter identifies as a female and goes and fights females and destroys, like, without question, just absolutely dominates. That is the biological reality between men and women, right? And that's the trouble with identifying, we'll get to that, moving away from sex as the biological reality to gender, an idea, right? And we'll see where that shift took place. So at the fundamental level, you have to know that that's where masculinity and femininity come from, is the fundamental natural level. There are biological facts. That's where men and women come from. Depending on what individual men and women do, they may be better or worse at being a man or a woman, or confused about their biological nature, or they don't like their biological nature. Not liking something doesn't change it. What I think in my mind doesn't change the external reality on the outside. Only one person does that, and he's called God, right? And that's really what society is trying to do, depose God and put themselves in his place. And then following upon those attributes, the natural genetic attributes of male and female, the personal and individual attributes of the person, my characteristics and skills, you get society's idea of men and women. What do most women do with their natural abilities? What do most men do with their natural abilities? What are they attracted to? What do they like doing? What are they good at? And that's how societal norms are created. Is where do people best fit in? Where are my strengths maximized? And where are my weaknesses, I don't want to say hidden, but they're not so evident, right? If a man's not good at cooking, join the military. Like, who cares, you know? Who's going to notice? Just whatever. So we'll get on with that. But what I did find also was that the SJW, social justice warrior types, would confuse, and even a lot of people would confuse fundamental facts with societal characteristics. They would say, oh, we're told that there are these innate qualities of men and women, but so we've grown up thinking that men are better at math and women are better at, or not so good at whatever, and whoa, hold on. Like, you just skipped from a fundamental innate fact to something which very much could be a societal characteristic, a bias or something like that, an ability or a talent at one thing or another. As skipping the, just kind of equating, you could say, a stereotype with a biological fact. They mix those up. There's not a very good distinction there. Where are we going to go from here? False. Okay, these are false ideas about nature, masculine and feminine. Research has shown there is very little difference between the brains of men and women. Okay, at like an empirical material level, probably. Like, their brains weigh the same, they have the same number of neurons and synapses, etc. If you're going to look at it from that standpoint, I would agree with you. But if you're going to try to, from this, make the claim that men and women think, there's very little difference between how they think, what they want, what they desire, what they fear, what's important to them, there's no comparison. And in fact, they've shown that hormones, testosterone and estrogen, affect the brain greatly, very, very greatly. Testosterone shuts down that part of the brain that feels compassion, right? So you get Mel Gibson and Braveheart, like splitting people's brains out and that kind of thing. Well, on this one in particular, it was, I think it was, what's that movie like? U-527 the submarine movie.
No, U-571.
There we go. I think it was something like that. I don't know if this is the one, but there was a scene where the submarine underwater takes a hit, it's leaking water, and there's a bunch of men trying to fix the leak, and they can't do it, and the whole sub is about to sink, and the order comes down to a guy at the hatch, close the hatch. And the men come and they're running like, no, don't shut it, and he's got to shut that door on his brothers and seal them to drown, right? That's what testosterone has to do. is it overrides that feeling of could be my battle brother, my actual brother. I've got to knowingly seal his fate, literally, otherwise we're all going to die. Men can do that because of testosterone. If you put a woman in that situation, close that hatch. She'll fall down and cover her eyes and start to cry because she can't handle the stress. She doesn't have the natural hormone to enable her to act in that extremely difficult situation, and everybody will die. That's why women shouldn't be on submarines or in the military in those high-stress situations. Maybe you get some women who can do it, but the majority of the women, that is their reaction. They can't handle that kind of stress. They don't have the testosterone to repress the emotions. Their emotions go through the roof, and they're a mess, right? Huge difference between the brains of men and women in that regards. People often act differently, not because of biological characteristics, but because of rigid societal norms created around femininity and masculinity. Again, the idea that gender is a social construct, or sex is a social construct. Very little difference, and it's maximized by how people are expected to act. This kind of begs the question, where did societal norms come from, if there wasn't a natural predisposition towards that? And why is every single society, without exception, like extremely small exceptions, the same in terms of how they treat men and women, right? Men are not naturally violent. Yes, we are. Right? Again, it's called testosterone. It's the aggressiveness, the tendency towards action. I would say that men are not naturally violent in terms of, how could I say, malice or evil, but they're naturally violent in terms of their mannerisms. Louder, more prone to physical activity, physical exertion. We could say physical violence in terms of like, what do they do? What do little boys do when they play? They wrestle, want to box, want to do sword fighting. Gender identity is a deeply held feeling of being male, female, or whatever. Again, gender identity, male, female, masculine, feminine, it's a feeling. There's no basis in hormones or biology or nature. That's a false principle. That even these people, like that I showed you earlier, that slide of toxic masculinity that we agreed with, and like, yeah, that's bad. These are their principles, and that's why they don't have the solution for it. So what would be the true statements we could say? True. Experience, history, science, and common sense have repeatedly demonstrated there's a great difference between the thoughts, feelings, desires, and attributes of men and women. As we gave the submarine example, the emotion versus estrogen versus testosterone, what it does to the brain. Huge biological difference. People most often act differently, not because of societal norms, but because of biological characteristics. Society expects this of men and women, and I'm okay, that makes sense to me. I'm more than happy to do that. Love it, great. Where, I mean, you go to take little kids into the toy store, and the girls see that aisle full of pink, and they run over there. And the boys see that aisle full of pink, and they run the other direction. Right? Where's the Legos and the other kind of stuff? There was a store, Sears, Target, etc., and they mixed up where the toys were, and they put dolls next to action figures and all that. They lost money. Parents complained. Like, I've got to go to 5 different aisles to get what my daughter wants. Well, that's a gender stereotype. She's 2. It's not a stereotype. I got some pictures on that I can show you later. Men are naturally aggressive, women are naturally passive. And that is in terms of if a man, actually was a counselor who told me this. When you have children, teenagers, who are abused, girls will stop talking. They will withdraw. They'll cut themselves. Right? He says, how do you know if a boy's being abused? He'll take a swing at you. He gets violent. So that's the difference. That's how nature deals with angst and problems, is the way women deal with it. In all situations, they withdraw. They go in, and men tend to lash out. And that's why we could say, in part, toxic masculinity is more noticeable, and to a certain degree more damaging, because his problems are exterior and they're directed outwards. That's when he goes bad to the outside. Women go bad on the inside, and depending on the woman, that can be really bad. Gender identity is a social construct. Biological sex is a reality. So we have to say that masculine and feminine are not based on your gender identity, it's based on your biological sex. That's where masculine and feminine comes from. Where did that term gender come from? This is in there twice. When did gender replace the word sex? This is, interestingly, this is a quote from Wikipedia. My little objective source. Sexologist John Money introduced the terminological distinction in 1955. And he said that, a person's biological sex doesn't have anything to do with how they identify. They can do anything. Because he was working a lot with transgender people in 1955. And that was still a disorder, classified as a serious disorder. Before his work, uncommon to use the word gender to anything but grammatical categories, right? The gender of the noun. Feminist theory embraced the concept in their goal, really to, this is interesting, so toxic masculinity is used by feminists to refer to all the characteristics of men that they are jealous of. Domination, sexual exploitation, aggressiveness, control. Feminists desire all of that. And when they push their feminism and attack that toxic masculinity, it's because they want to get it for themselves. And we'll see that. I don't know if I put a slide in here about that, but that is there's a very good YouTube video about toxic femininity. I don't have it on here, but it's a little bit long, but it's worth giving a look to. But it's interesting that it was feminists who made it popular and who really pushed it forward. Okay, we should think of humanity. This is where one of the things of toxic masculinity was a fear of being called effeminate. Oh, that's girly. I don't want to be like a girl, right? And that comes in part from, recall I mentioned the kind of false and exaggerated idea of masculine and feminine in the 50s, 40s, that kind of thing, the John Wayne uber masculinity. And the idea is men are over here, women are over here. They have their ability, occupations, and their nature, and they, they're distinct line down the middle, right? So you don't want to do anything a girl does, because you'd be a girl, you'd be a sissy, right? And then you get the mob chasing the boy and all that kind of thing. What are you going to do? You're going to cry? You're going to cry? So that's an exaggerated, we could say, a caricature. The way we ought to look at humanity is there's a little bit of overlap, right? Men and women have their own innate, distinct realities that make them men and women, masculine and feminine, but they have this section in the middle. And their abilities, occupations, and nature, they're proper to women and men, but they're also crossover. Authority, for example. Authority, power are masculine characteristics, but say Queen Isabella of Spain could possess those characteristics while still retaining her feminine nature. Nurturing, caring for children. We could say feminine characteristics, but isn't that what a priest is supposed to do with his preschool, kindergarten class, or the first graders, or his own children, right? So there are things that men and women should be able to share, and this is how we understand women. I just don't get women. I don't get it, and women are yeah, we don't get it either. Right? And actually, women they want men to figure them out. What makes a woman mad is that she'll tell her husband she wants something, and he does it, and she gets mad because she didn't really want it. And she didn't know that until he gave it to her, and she realized this really isn't what I wanted. Then she's mad that he couldn't figure out what she wanted. So there's that part of toxic femininity that they don't like to talk about. Because women talk about men need to be this, men need to be that. What feminists and what they really want, as we'll see from a very good video, they want men to be more masculine. They do not want men to be less, they want them to be more, and they won't realize it until men are. But they have to have good examples of it. So we need to be able to meet in the middle. We can't be afraid of, certain things. What is it? St. Joan of Arc, right? Riding a war horse, wearing armor, cutting her hair short, putting on men's trousers. You know what? The Catholic Church accepted that in the 14th century. That's a crossover. What else? Catherine of Siena. She wasn't a nun. She wasn't married. She was a single, unmarried girl, and she was constantly writing letters to the Pope telling him what to do. And he needed to do it. And thanks be to God, one of them finally listened to her and went from Avignon, France, back to Rome. That ended the Avignon papacy. Plenty of women. The Blessed Virgin Mary. What did we just say before this conference, right? This talk. The Rosary. Praying to Mary, our Queen, who is bright as the sun, fair as the moon, terrible as an army set in battle array. Right? That's a pretty masculine characteristic that she possesses. So there needs to be that crossover, and the argument really is about what is a crossover. The other exaggerated extreme, the one extreme of the John Wayne masculine femininity, there's a line in the middle and don't cross. The other one would be there is no line outside the box in the middle. Masculine feminine is in that box in the middle and there's nothing on the outside. Nothing men are or can be that women aren't or could be also. This false idea of this false egalitarianism. Masculinity. Those are things that common themes I was finding online, describing toxic masculinity. Domination, aggression, violence, emotional detachment in terms of dismissive, like I don't care. I saw this movie, it had Billy Bob Thornton in it, and Halle Berry, and he was a mean dude, and his son committed suicide right in front of him. He just got up and walked away, didn't care. That's emotional detachment, right? That's really bad. Intimidation, objectification of women. That one is crazy because that was encouraged in the 60s and 70s. In the 80s, I think there was 7 women, the Rochester 7, and they got in trouble for going out in public topless because they should be equal with men. And even today, like in 2015, there was this huge movement of women should be able to go topless in public just like men. What do they think is going to happen? Be objectified. Hyper-competitiveness. You see that a lot in the business world. If you got a business, you seek for ways to put your competitors out of business. Like why? You got $1 billion or $1.5 billion. So there's this. The email ego gets into there, and as I said, the fear of being effeminate. I don't want to be girly. So what's healthy masculinity, right? Instead of domination, you have competence. I don't need to dominate others. I don't need to be over them. If I'm competent in my own sphere, your abilities don't threaten me. I don't have to dominate you because I know that I'm competent in my own area. I'm confident in my abilities. I'm confident in my judgment and my prudence. And your whatever good, I'll listen to it. I'll want to acquire that for myself. And if it's not good, I won't worry about it. All right, that's competence. That's security, and you don't need to dominate others. You don't want to be aggressive, you want to be assertive. Aggression is kind of a hostile thing. Assertiveness is when necessary, you can be strong. Right? That's the difference between the two. Violence is action. When you need to take action, you do it. If it needs to be violent, you can get violent. Right? But the theme here is control. Control of self, self-control. Emotional detachment is, again, emotional control. Now is not the time. I'm sorry, I can't feel bad for you right now. I'll do that later, but we've got a job to do. Right? Quick story about that, and this is Charles Krulak told the story of how when he was a lieutenant in Vietnam, he was a former commandant of the Marine Corps, and he told this story to us when we were at the Naval Academy. He came and talked to us, and he said he was a lieutenant in Vietnam, and he had his radio operated with him, a young kid of like 18 years old, and he's on the radio, talking and stuff, and then his radio operator gets shot. And so he runs over and he kind of picks him up and he's like, don't worry, the medic's coming, you're going to be okay. And he's sitting there kind of comforting the guy, and the gunnery sergeant comes over, takes his helmet off, and boom, smashes the lieutenant in his helmet, sends him flying. And the gunnery sergeant says, Lieutenant, get the hell up there with the rest of your men, and you leave him where he is. Right? Because like you got 30 other men in your platoon that need you, and this one guy here, the doc knows where he is, he's coming. Get up there and do your job. Or more men will die. Right? That's emotional control, that's that testosterone, that's that focus, that's that aggression, that's that violence, and it needed to happen. Right? Because that's what and your wives and children at home the ability to be where they are safe. That's what allows that. Instead of, you don't need to intimidate others, you need to inspire them. Right? You inspire them to action, you inspire them to goodness, or if necessary, you inspire them with fear. Right? Don't cross me. Right? Did I make that clear, son, or whoever it is, right? You inspire people with the appropriate emotion. You don't always rely on fear. You choose what's appropriate to the circumstance. Objectification of women is respect for women. Interesting, and again, to toxic femininity, G.K. Chesterton said, when a woman raises her fist against a man, she puts herself in the only position he's not afraid of her. Another, it was somebody from the Prager University, PragerU, we'll see, and he said that feminism seeks to make first-class women into second-class men. They try to be men, and they just can't do as good a job as men can. So respect women for their strengths and who they are and what they have and what they represent. Hyper-competitiveness is a desire for success. And this is something we'll see also, a virtue that desires not just the good for me or my business, but the good for the economy. That guy, that business is good for the U.S. Don't put him out of business. Let's actually even help the guy, kind of a thing. And you see that among small companies. Like they'll help each other out. It's when you get the mega companies that want to exert that domination. Fear of being effeminate. Fear of being effeminate, right? You know what effeminacy really is, right? And you don't want to be that, right? You don't want to be like a woman and just like out of control, crying emotion. Let's say that again. You don't want to be like a toxic femininity. If being a toxic, having toxic masculinity is bad, if you're a man and you exhibit symptoms of toxic femininity, that's even worse. And that is worse. But if people don't know what real masculine and femininity is, they'll get that confused. I heard it was one YouTube video, some guy was talking about how people, like this idea that men should conform to social pressures. Like I was with a friend and we were on a job and we were just like laughing the whole time and the whole day we were just laughing about everything. And some guy came up to me and said, if you were my son, I'd give you a whooping. And he said, is that just because we were laughing and having a good time? It's like, no, it was because you're exhibiting toxic femininity, which is giddiness. Laughing about everything, taking something serious and making it light. Having a job and ignoring it. Right? That's the idea behind it. Okay, femininity. Toxic femininity. Domination. Passive aggression. Psychological violence. Malice. They know they're trying to hurt you. Emotional instability, manipulation, seduction, hyper-competitiveness, fear of being unloved. All right, and there's way more. This is a representative list. As I mentioned earlier, feminists want to dominate. That's why they hate men, because they have what they want. Women want to be in control of the presidency, corporations, et cetera, and the whole thing is it's male domination, it's unfair, and it's not that it's unfair, it's just that it's not us. We want to be the ones who are unfair. Passive aggression, there should be 2 G's there. They're less outwardly violent. They're more, like again, passively violent. But they will be violent in terms of especially their psychological violence. Women are absolutely awful to each other. If a man, in high school, a boy doesn't like somebody else, if he sees him, he's like, look at that punk. Punk, push him around, walk away, right? If he's having a bad day, he's like, I'm going to pound him, right? Target of opportunity. Women who don't like each other plot. They'll find out who that other girl's friends are and start spreading lies and gossip. If she finds out she's having a party, she'll try to ruin it. If she knows she's going to do something or getting good grades, she tries to make her get bad grades. Right? It's very vindictive, very malicious, and very petty. It's an extremely toxic way of behavior, and it can be psychologically far more damaging than getting beat up, right? Because a bully is beating up a kid, and the kid stands up and knocks the bully cold, he'll respect him, right? With psychological violence that women do to each other, there's not a whole lot you can do. Emotional instability, like I mentioned, they'll tell you they want something, but they actually don't want it. They want the opposite. Grown women can be like, throw tantrums like spoiled little girls. They're out of control. If you give them what they want, they throw a fit. If you don't give them what they want, they throw a fit. And that's when they indulge, because their emotions are a lot based on their hormones. And men have one primary hormone, testosterone, and women have like 7. And testosterone is like this, and the other ones are like all over the place. So a woman, if she doesn't have self-control, if she gives in to her emotions at the time, she'll be all over the map. She just won't resist. She just give in to her emotions. I'm angry, I'm going to display anger. I'm happy, I'll display happiness. And it can change in seconds. Manipulation, they will try to, behind the scenes, it goes along with the passive aggression and psychological violence, try to get you to do something, but they won't be direct about it. They'll be very indirect. We'll see what that can be a virtue, we'll see that. Seduction, in the video, you saw the women in the bikinis and all that. They like that. They like to, they will dress provocatively and see, for women, the knowledge that a man wants them and desires them and is sexually attracted to them, for many women is as fulfilling as sexual contact is for men. So when women do that, they're getting this, they feel, they get the attention, they feel affirmed, they feel a kind of love, and that's what they want. And they guy, and that's their conquest, so to speak. Did you see all those guys looking at me, etc., etc.? They also use that to dominate other women. Women will go into a place and they'll see your boyfriend, and they'll go the other girl's boyfriend, and they'll try to seduce him. And then they'll lord it over the other woman, like, I made your boyfriend look at me more than you. And they won't talk to each other. It's just, there's this like quiet cat fight going on. And I saw it happen to some guy, and he's like playing pool, and he has no idea what's going on, and there's just like World War III going on around him, and he's like drinking beer and having a good time. So hyper-competitiveness. In the workplace, 70% of women say that they were harassed by their female boss. They call it the queen bee syndrome. If a woman's in charge, no other woman can be more competent than her, prettier than her, have more attention, that kind of thing. So it's not men who are hyper-competitive, women are too. And the fear of being unloved, right? Men feared being effeminate. Women fear being unloved. Not considered, ignored, unimportant, not thought about. Women fear that. Healthy femininity, self-control, again, and this is a huge difference between boys and girls. Women do not generally care about competence. If they're incompetent, they don't care. In sports, if a girl is not good at sports, and he's like, come on, what's wrong with you? She's like, I can't do this, and she'll throw it down, and she'll cry, right? And then you come over and you comfort her, and she feels great, because you're paying attention to her. Some girls will actually intentionally be bad at sports to get attention. Right? The attention is more important than being competent. I don't care that I'm horrible at this. If a boy does poorly, he'll get mad and like throw the stuff down. You try to comfort him. He's like, get away from me. I don't want your comfort. I don't want your attention. I'm mad that I didn't do a good job. Right? For him, competency is important. I don't care whether you like me or not. I want to be the best. That's the difference between men and women. Women like, I don't care about even being good. I just want to be appreciated. Passive aggression, honesty. You know what? If you've got a problem with somebody, say something. Don't sit there and hide behind a sweet smile and pretend you're their friend and then stab them in the back, right? Be honest about it. Psychological violence, right? Charity ought to be displayed. Emotional instability, women can be mature. Manipulation becomes discretion. right? You don't always have to say things flat out bluntly. You can be discreet about things, which is indirect, but without manipulating people. Seduction, women should be beautiful, humble, desire for the virtue, etc. Okay, toxic humanity. All those things, pride, vanity, selfishness, indifference, cruelty, those come out differently depending on if you're a man or a woman. Pride, how do men exhibit pride? How do women exhibit pride? Different ways. Both men and women will display pride with a vulgar display of power, we could say. Men will display power by money, how much money they have, flashing their, whatever, credit card, spending, splurging money. Physical power, intellectual power, they'll make somebody else feel stupid. I'm intellectually superior. Positional power, like name dropping, right? Those are all manifestations of pride. How do women display pride or vanity or power? With their physical beauty, like again, seduction. That's a power I have over your husband, right? Vanity wants other people to love me for whatever reason. Love me for my beauty, love me for my social status, love me for my money, love me for my car, for my whatever. Vanity is the same thing. Selfishness, I don't care about you, I care about me. All these things are common to human beings, but depending on if you're a man or a woman, they come out differently, right? That's where toxic masculinity and femininity come from, is toxic humanity. And that's because of the original sin, Adam and Eve in the garden, who disobeyed God's commandments and broke their nature and ours as well. If you indulge any base desire, lust, anger, envy, that has to do with generally other people, wanting what others have, physical, material, being angry at others, greed, gluttony, sloth, personal vices. Healthy humanity, and this is what was understood traditionally in the past as vice and virtue, right and wrong, good and evil. And then you have in the 60s and the 70s all these kinds of books like Beyond Good and Evil. We've passed beyond that outdated concept. Morality is a social construct kind of thing. It has no basis in nature. It's just what we agree upon as good or bad. So it's not that the idea so the vice and virtue was abandoned, and now we're coming back to it. It wasn't that they didn't want morality, that they didn't believe morality existed. They didn't want that morality. Because it was things like, purity, and no divorce, and no contraception, and no abortion, and all these things that were in their way of indulging their base desires. Right, so the world had to topple the current idea of vice and virtue, and then replace it with whatever they wanted. And now it's crazy. They're all over the place. Humility is a remedy for pride. Pride is an inordinate love of my own excellence, we could say. Pride makes me think I'm here. In reality, I'm down here. In actual reality, I'm probably down here, but I think I'm down here, right? So humility is accepting the truth about ourselves. Humility and truth are convertible. A humble person is a truthful person because he accepts what's true. How do I feel about it? Does it make me look good or bad? I don't care. What I ask, is it true? If it's true, I accept it. That's humility. Vanity is I love my own excellence by pride. Vanity is I want others to love my own excellence, or rather my projection of my excellence. This is how good I think I am. I want you to think I'm that good also. That's vanity. Honor is the virtue, we could say, opposed to that, serving to get what they deserve. If I'm down here, I don't want you to flatter me because that's not true. Give me what is fitting. Right? And that's honor. Selfishness cares about me. Charity cares for others. Indifference, I don't care about you. Compassion, I do care about you. Cruelty, worse than indifference, I care about you. I want to hurt you. Right? And love is I want what's good for you. Healthy humanity replaces lust, anger, and envy with purity, meekness, and piety. Meekness is the virtue which controls anger. I put piety as opposed to envy, because envy sorrows over another's good. But piety is the virtue whereby we respect those above us. God, parents, ancestors, and our country, our society. And if somebody in my society has something which is good, the society benefits. Everybody benefits by your competency, your wealth, your abilities, all of your good attributes. Everybody benefits from that. And so if I'm envious of that, what I'm really saying is I wish society was a little bit less. I wish other people didn't benefit from what you have because I'm jealous of you. That's not good for society. And so piety recognizes that. Greed and gluttony are controlled by temperance, and sloth is controlled by discipline. Doesn't matter how I feel, is it the right thing to do? I'm going to do it. Oh, make men masculine again. This is a very good video by Prager University, which actually kind of summarizes a lot of what I said. And I was going through YouTube, and you can tell like a bad video, it's like toxic masculinity, 12,000 views. Good video, toxic masculinity, 800,000 views, 1.2 million. This one, 8.5 million views. So you'll see here, I'll get into it, it's quite a good video. And they do it well. They kind of, you're not sure where it's going to go from the beginning. You're like, ooh, what is this? Make a man masculine again.
Rape, murder, war. They all have one thing in common. Men. Aggression, violence, ambition unchecked by conscience, all the stuff of toxic masculinity, right? And the solution is obvious. Make men less toxic. Make men less masculine. Make men more like women. But I'm here to tell you that that way of thinking is not only wrong, it's dangerous. Here's why. When you try to make men more like women, you don't get less toxic masculinity. You get more. Why? Because bad men don't become good when they stop being men. They become good when they stop being bad. Aggression, violence, and unbridled ambition can't be eliminated from the male psyche. They can only be harnessed. And when they are harnessed, they are tools for good, not for harm. The same masculine traits that bring destruction also defeat tyranny. The traits that foster greed also build economies. The traits that drive men to take foolish risks also drive men to take heroic risks. The answer to toxic masculinity isn't less masculinity. It's better masculinity. And we know what that looks like. It's a young man opening the door for a girl on their first date. It's a father working long hours to provide for his family. It's a soldier risking his life to defend his country. The growing problem in today's society isn't that men are too masculine. It's that they're not masculine enough. When men embrace their masculinity in a way that is healthy and productive, they are leaders, warriors, and heroes. When they deny their masculinity, they run away from responsibilities, leaving destruction and despair in their wake. The consequences can be seen everywhere. 1 in 4 fathers now lives apart from his children. And children who grow up without a dad are generally more depressed than their peers who have a mother and a father. They are at far greater risk for incarceration, teen pregnancy, and poverty. 71% of high school dropouts are fatherless. Of all the rocks upon which we build our lives, family is the most important. And we are called to critical every father is to that foundation. That was said by then Senator Barack Obama in 2008. If we are honest with ourselves, he went on, we'll admit that too many fathers are missing from too many lives and too many homes. As much as we try to deny the need for real masculine strength in society, there's no denying its necessity. Healthy families and strong communities depend on the leadership and bravery of good men. Yet, the current trend is to feminize young men in the hopes of achieving some utopian notion of equality and peace. And it starts at the earliest ages. In the school classroom, boys are invariably the problem. On the playground, aggressive games like finished. We tell young men that their intrinsic desire to compete is wrong. Everybody gets a trophy. Don't run up the score. This anti-male tilt continues on through higher education and into the workplace. It has created millions of tentative men, unhappy women, and confused boys and girls. Here's a secret that every woman knows. Women want real men. Men they can count on and, yes, look up to. No amount of feminist theory will change that. I don't know any woman at any age who is attracted to a passive man who looks to her to be his provider, protector, and leader. Every woman I know wants a strong, responsible man. That's not a consequence of a social construct or cultural pressure. It's innate. The devaluation of masculinity won't end well because feminine, passive men don't stop evil. Passive men don't defend, protect, or provide. Passive men don't lead. Passive men don't do the things we have always needed men to do for society to thrive. In his book, The Abolition of Man, English social philosopher C.S. Lewis writes about this problem. He describes the tension between cerebral man and visceral man. By his intellect, Lewis explains, by his appetite, mere animal. We need both. Take away one, and you're left with a man who's either weak or wicked. And in a world of wickedness, weak men are nothing more than enablers of wicked men. Rape, murder, war. They all have two things in common. Bad men who do the raping, murdering, and warring, and weak men who won't stop them. We need good men who will. It's not masculinity that's toxic, it's the lack of it. I'm Allie Stuckey for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To help keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
Okay, there we go. Thoughts on that video? That'd have been a much better Gillette commercial, I think. Right?
Sorry.
Yeah.
So the conversation in my house lately has been very much around what we see in the political landscape right now. And I mean, in Colorado, it's gotten awful. There's things being pushed through without any kind of recourse. They're signing bills behind closed doors and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
When you mentioned the number of people watching the videos, the indication is that people actually do get that there's they see this idea of, whether you call it liberalism, conservatism, and that kind of stuff, however you term the point. Why are we still seeing the continual advancement of the femininity and all, or the
Sure.
femininity and that kind of stuff? Why does it seem like it's not really being pushed back against very strongly?
Right.
And there's something else to that point, and it's, while I guess maybe there's a little bit of a leading question that I have. Is it because we're is it kind of a last-ditch effort from the very liberal mindset that corridor of people? Is it kind of like a last-ditch effort to really hold on to what they have, or are we actually seeing something that could generally take our society as a whole in a really, really bad way?
Oh, sure, yeah. Okay, so the question, I think, essentially is, why does it seem that with 8.5 million people watching this video, apparently sharing it and agreeing with it, that's a huge number for this kind of a political video. So it seems like most people get the innate character of men and women, male and female. They don't buy the transgender theory. Why does it seem like that theory continues to gain ascendancy? Right? And any comments? Yeah, Michael.
There is no way that flesh is weak. I mean, you've got weak men who are unwilling to do what's necessary to stand up.
Weak men won't do what's necessary to stand up. Just what was described in the video. Okay. What else? What other ideas? Brian?
They push it in the media all the time.
Okay, so a disproportionate number of liberals in charge of the media. So that's what you hear.
Augustine had a great line: heretics are zealous while Catholics are lazy.
Oh, okay. So it's not, maybe again, that passivity of weakness or passivity of laziness or a desire for comfort. Okay? What else?
Yeah, I want to. So just before World War II, the French had built this massive divisions that were sitting there in the Ruhr Valley.
French in World War II, right?
Right. This is before the war started, and Hitler, with 13 divisions, goes and occupies the Ruhr Valley. The French outnumbered them 3-1, could have wiped them out, prevented World War II, but they didn't, because they were afraid of a repeat of World War I.
Oh, right, yeah.
So you have this sort of thing, is like we've lost. If I go up and I stand up to this, I will be ridiculed, I will be, right? And you're afraid that you don't have enough friends standing with you. And that's...
Why are the streets of Paris lined with trees? Germans like to march in the shade. Right. Yeah, you hear about those surplus French rifles? Never fired, only dropped once. Right, so, all right, yeah. So the idea being that the French, the Maginot Line, there was a fear of a repeat of World War I, so they weren't willing to take the action necessary really to firmly stand against the German aggression. So I would say that. Why is it gaining ascendancy? I think in part because I go through YouTube and it's hard to find videos like this without getting sucked into, Ben Shapiro's 5 best comebacks. Ben Shapiro destroys liberal, kind of thing.
And he really doesn't.
Well, it's like, okay, it's like occasionally he's got some really good ones. Many times it's just that he's stating the obvious and he's not caving to liberal pressure. So what you have is, if I had a picture of certain U.S. bishops, I'd put them up there. Because what happened was, the U.S. bishops should be the ones holding the line. They are the public face of morality of the church, and they sold out the church. And people look to them for their cue on how do I act. When this is what is being said, how do I respond? And it's been for the past 70 years, yield, agree, give way, apologize, passive. And everybody has done that. Everybody in a public position who's been threatened or bullied by the left I shouldn't say by the left, by the liberals, the progressives. You get them on both sides. They've caved. There's been this cowardly attitude in the United States for at least 40 years, I would say, 30, 40 years. Cowardice repeatedly, over and over again. I remember still, though, the U.S. Marine Corps, my beloved Corps, before it fell. The ACLU saw a picture, this was in the 90s, early 2000s, a picture of a bunch of Marines, like they had their hats off and heads bowed in prayer at like this public event. And the ACLU said, oh no, we can't have this. We've got to stop this. This is a violation of church, separation of church and state. So they contacted the Marine Corps, Public Relations Division, and filed their complaint. And the colonel in charge, his official response was, F the ACLU. F you guys. And that was it. That's what they got. It stopped them in their tracks. What are they going to do, right? They rely on passivity and weakness in order to make the advances. So that really is the difference. Is just people in positions to be firm aren't doing it.
One of the things, too, that the news media, we have one over here when you got 5 on this side, and it's a competition between if they're going to watch CNN and listen to the lies and all that, that's what they feed off that. Fox News stands up, is accountable for all the newscasts. They do it the right way, and this is what we've been progressively leaning towards to the left, because we only have one.
Numbers, right?
In numbers.
Yeah, so outnumbering. And it would be hard to, or how could I say not hard, but it would be one-dimensional to try to reduce this to a single cause. Toxic masculinity, femininity, this whole, even the, I thought it was interesting, Jordan Peterson, right, that brilliant natural law adherent from Canada, he was asked about political correctness. And it was funny, he expected a simple response. Would you describe political correctness as a constraint on people's ability to say things in public? And Jordan Peterson goes on with this 5-minute explanation of French Marxism in the 1960s and 70s, and like this huge involvement of these social movements spanning 50, 70 years. And then he finished, and the guy was like, he was just looking for a yes or no answer. But it shows you that what we see political correctness, it goes way, way, way deeper. And really, you couldn't separate it from the history of the infiltration of the church. communists, Marxists, modernism, the Enlightenment, the French Revolution, all these things, right? That's the huge iceberg, and we're just getting the results, kind of the tip of it.
The other thing I want to make clear too is that our religious leaders that we had for us older guys in the 70s and the 60s and all that, Billy Graham, Dr. Falwell, these kind of men, morale majority, your Colorado football coach, the mile, the 1,000,000-mile mark, and taking a stand and being accountable for that. We've lost that track.
Right. So there's a way that, how could I say this? Even when you have an adherence to the natural law, if you're off by a little bit, that little bit's going to get bigger as time goes on. Right? So even though you have a man and he's firm in discipline and he's honorable and he's just and all these good virtues, if he is impure, he's going to go down. He's going to make a mistake. He's going to give a bad example. And that bad example in the next generation is going to be worse and worse and worse, and that's what happens. So it's not enough when you have got especially a coordinated attack against morality, which is what we've had. If you're weak in any one area, and it's not like we make mistakes, but if you're defending evil as something good, if you're ignoring it, you're going to contribute to the eventual collapse. So that's what happened is, especially with the we could say the Protestant morality, or that kind of like Norman Rockwell morality of the 50s. It was on the surface looked really good, but there were a lot of bad principles at play already, especially contraception, which is one of them, which is feeding into greed, envy, selfishness, right? Okay. Yeah, passive men are the problem, especially in the church. I have a theory that why homosexuality is a downfall of the church. Because in the Garden of Eden, Satan didn't try to tempt Adam because he knew he couldn't win that frontal assault. So he tempted Eve. He went through the woman, and the woman caused the man to fall. So with the priesthood in the church, Satan couldn't get the men in the church to betray the church. He needed women. But women can't be priests. So he turned men into women by making them homosexual. And a homosexual man is an inverse of a man. He's a female man. And so he has all that toxic femininity homosexuals display, and that's even worse than toxic females. Is a toxic homosexual. Every homosexual is toxic to some degree. The ones who aren't trying, they're advocating it. They accept it, and they give into it. Okay, very good.
There doesn't seem to be a move afoot to get rid of them.
What?
After that meeting in Rome.
Oh yeah, we're waiting for the Babylonian armies to come and sack Jerusalem. It's sad, but that's what I think we have to wait for. In that somebody asked, everybody in the church responsible for doing something is themselves corrupt. Well, like what's going to happen? It's like, I don't know, imprisonment, by the U.S. Department of Justice or whatever, just bankruptcy. It's going to be ugly. That's maybe what's necessary. I hope not, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Want to give us a call to action?
Pray the Rosary. Do Ezekiel 90. Right, if you heard about that one.
Exodus 90.
Exodus 90. Oh, sorry, Ezekiel. I've been reading Ezekiel the past couple days. Here's been the readings. Ezekiel 18. Exodus 90. That's a good program. Exodus 90 is 90 days, and you no alcohol, no eating in between meals, no sweets, no hot showers. What's the other one? Like no internet or something?
No internet, no media, no unnecessary technology. Yeah. Exercise regularly.
Yeah, it's good. It's very good. And after 90 days, 90 days is not the end. That's just the breaking in period to get you used to it. The 90 is like, that's how long it's going to take you before it just becomes a habit. So, what else?
Just wanted to set the record straight on history.
Oh, history, yes, okay.
The French lost 60,000 men in 3 days. defending the marginal line.
Were they defending the Maginot Line?
And between the Blitzkrieg too. And it's just the Blitzkrieg.
Yeah, they just went around it.
Yeah, the Belgium. Yeah, I knew there was something about that.
It's like before
Before the battle.
Yeah, the French held the line until our English evacuate out of Dunkirk. So they did actually fight a little bit.
These history buffs. Right. The idea being, though, I just certainly do remember that while Germany was preparing for war, everybody knew it. Everybody knew Germany was mobilizing, and they did nothing. And the French built the Maginot Line because they're like, well, we don't want to aggress and stop it, so we'll just build this impregnable wall. And then what can they do? Well, let them build up, and then we'll just stop them here. So I think that was the mentality you were referring to. Yeah. And they lost how many men in 3 days?
30 days.
30. Oh.
60,000 casualties.
Yeah. Not as bad as Gettysburg, 50,000 in one day. Yeah. Okay, well, who else besides history buffs? Okay, very good. I think that's enough for tonight. We'll go ahead and close with a prayer, and we'll go back, and we're going to strive to be better men by following the precepts of the church and the traditional sayings of the saints and the traditional church practices. And we can be part of that solution. Let's say a prayer. Where's the crucifix? Okay, let's do something. All right, whatever. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end.
Our holy guardian angels and patron saints, I'll give you a blessing. Benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et manet semper. Amen. Okay.